So now we're moving on with our next topic, and that is actually a roundtable. It is called COBAIN, and it means challenges, opportunities, and best practices in news media industries. And it will be hosted by Matthew Purver. Matt, please.
Thanks, Marco. And in many ways, I think the idea is not to move onto a different topic, at least to start with, but really, so the idea of this session was to give us a chance to make sure that we talk about things from the news media industry perspective, which Neil has given us a very nice kind of segue into. And of course, this morning we were mostly talking about things from the technology designer perspective, if you like, or the research perspective. So on this roundtable, I wanted to give particular prominence to our industry partners. That's going to be Salla Salmela from STT in Finland, Ivar Krustok from Express Media in Estonia, and Marko Pranjic from Tricoda in Croatia. But I'd really like it if people who want to contribute questions can do so through the chat, and then maybe if it's helpful, we'll introduce people actually through audio as well if they want to join in the discussion. But to start with, I wanted to actually sort of explicitly try and follow on from what Neil was just so helpfully telling us about, and ask our industry representatives whether the picture that Neil was describing, which kind of comes from his experience as a designer working with the news industry, is that a picture that you recognize as news industry representatives yourself? The challenges that he was talking about, things like the availability of resources, the lack of willingness to take on new tools, or perhaps the suspicion and the fear of new tools. Do those challenges, are those things you recognize? Are they things that you think are important within your own industry and perhaps your own companies? Or do you think there are actually other things that you'd like to highlight as well? So perhaps if we could start with Ivar, do those things, does that picture describe the kinds of challenges that you recognize? Do you think that it's optimistic or pessimistic? And is there anything else you'd want to kind of add to it?
No, in short, I would say yes, it describes, and I'm pretty sure most media houses, the issue usually comes with, it's not even, I would say, maybe the lack of resources to implement something, but it's the lack of resources to actually go to every person so that every person understands what was implemented, so they would actually really understand what was going on. Because all of these new solutions, they usually help, but the question is, does people understand what they're actually doing, what they're actually for, and to actually go into individual levels with people? Because if you just say something out loud, this is something that's a new tool, and everybody either will use it, or even if it's not something everybody can use, if it's something that only the end users see, then also sometimes it comes out with different issues, usually from the editorial side of the business, not even the business side.
And so working on the things that you've been helping us work with over the last couple of years, do you see any kind of ways forward? Are there practices that you are starting to adopt that might help get over some of those initial problems?
I think usually with these things it's time. You get some people on board. Those people are the ones that promote this, and if the people you get on board are I don't know, somewhat leaders in this space, usually everybody else will follow. So I think that's one thing that's always important, is try to get some people who are really thought as leaders in the editorial space, and if you get those people, then you're good enough to go.
Thanks, Ivar. Salla, I wonder if I could move on to you and ask the same question, whether you kind of recognize the challenges that we've been talking about so far, or whether there's anything else that you think is important.
Thanks, Matthew. Yes, I do recognize them as well. I also think that everything boils down to resources. So the biggest obstacles, in my opinion, and I think quite a few people in the media industry can agree, are the resources, money, of course, but also the amount of people and time. Because as Ivar said, just implementing something into the newsroom does not, it's not enough. You have to be able to tell people, like, how is this helping you? What do you need to do to like unlock the potential of this solution? And what does this mean to the whole workflow? So if we only give people like a new tech and then leave them to their own device, they will have like zero motivation to try this new technology. But in my experience, when you do give people time and you do give them an opportunity to discuss the new tech and if possible, even be part of the development, then the motivation just grows. So if you can argument to people that this is actually going to help you, we are not going to replace you, but make your workflow easier, then the motivation to use the new technology actually like grows quite rapidly. As at least in SCT, I think this is the case. So when people realize that, this actually helps me to be faster and more efficient and takes away like some repetitive task, they're actually pretty happy to use new tech. But the companies need to invest the time and money to do that. Right. And I think that is sometimes a problem.
So do you have any success stories that you can share with us from STT? It sounds like you kind of, if your optimism is founded on some past experience of people actually deciding that this is something they want to use.
Well, often like the success stories often are not maybe like IE, but just like smaller solutions. But I think the same pattern just works even with like IE solutions, for example. You just need to have this time and space to discuss what we're about to do and kind of like make people feel that they understand and that they have a, that they can actually like affect what we're doing as a company and as a team. So it's, yeah, I think you just need to discuss with people, and for that you have to invest time, so you have to invest money.
Marco, can I turn to you? You're in a slightly different position to the others, I guess, in that a lot of your time is spent trying to build AI solutions, but within news media industry. Do you see the same kind of patterns?
Yes, definitely. And if you present this story with, you know, you come to the journalist and you tell him, you know, you have a problem. Trust me on that. And this is my way to solve your problem. Then it sounds almost, you know, obvious that there will be some rejection. There will be some, you know, pushback from it. And yes, of course, this always happens, and we like to identify. We like to call this problem alignment. You know, this type of alignment between all parties need to agree. We had some failures because, you know, top management presented some solution as, you know, top strategic, most important result, something, but middle management didn't see it as their success. They had their own, you know, KPIs, they had their own objectives, and, you know, everything just watered down and nothing was done. So yeah, yes, I agree. All those problems presented by Professor Maiden from the, you know, lowest point on the hierarchy, from and by lowest I mean people that do actual work that will use those tools, are also present in all upper parts of each organization. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah. We have reasons for optimism, but we have a lot of reasons for pessimism as well.
Yes, the only way I have seen stuff work is when you have several people that, you know, you teach them how to use this system, and then they go around and tell you, know, I did this and it gave us cool results. It's much faster this way. And this is also one of the suggestions Professor Maiden suggested, to have a champion in the you know, newsroom that will push those tools.
So yeah, getting understanding and alignment, but actually having somebody who's willing to push the ideas for you or with you, I guess would be better. So it might be the way to go. We have a question in the chat from Johan Lindgren. Johan, I wonder, would you like to ask it in audio fashion, or shall I read it out?
Well, I can speak if you want,
Right.
no problem. But I'm at my daughter's place, so if you hear kids in the background, it's my grandkids. Well, it's not much of a question. It's more of a thought that came up to my mind when I hear these things. It's like the tools are something for the journalists to play with for their own amusement, or so to speak, if I push the statement a bit. But I guess in the end, the reason to use various tools is to produce some sort of output that is of value to the customers that in the end pay for the things we produce. I work at the news agency, so of course our focus is a lot to produce metadata and markup that can be automated at the media, the newspapers in Sweden and other media that receive our things we produce. And the tools are only of value if they help us achieve those tools. So having tools that are just fun to play with, I see no reason for it's. And if you want to deliver something to your customers, then I guess one big thing to motivate the journalists or editors working with this is that you should. We need this because this is what we're selling to our customers, and then we need to produce this, and this is the best way to do it. Our focus is trying to automate stuff as much as possible to relieve the editors and journalists of the need to tag things and choose that type of things. But some things need to be done manually, and then good tools to assist in that is very good, of course. But I think the motivation in the end is to produce output to the customers, not to have fun in the editorial room.
Yeah. So, Ivar, I think.
Yeah, I think the last thing the last sentences you mentioned, I think those answered the fun part of the thing. I think also it's important for the editorial staff to feel like the company is taking care of them. So that means even if we can save time for like each article, if you can say 1, 2, 3 minutes per article, in some cases that's a huge leap forward for their workload. So that means, yes, of course, the end consumer wins because they might get the news 1 minute faster. For most articles, it doesn't matter, of course, but in this case, it matters a lot for the person who has to do it. So, I mean, everything on the editorial side also has to be fast, has to be comfortable, has to help them with their flow. So I think in the end, you also answered your question. It's not a fun tool, but it's something to, I would say, alleviate some of the pains that come from their everyday work, because they can save time for that.
Marco?
Yes, I would like to add something. Yes, I completely agree with this observation that from the point of view of some business, this should be the primary motivation for everyone included. I believe this is the reason why this is such an important topic, because it's not intuitive why there is this pushback. From my understanding, everything that people do, they want to feel some kind of ownership of this result, some kind of pride, what they produced. And if you introduce a tool that, takes away a part of this pride, they will be, not very eager to jump on it. So maybe there is a problem also of incentives I don't know, but yeah, I believe this is the reason why this is such an important topic to discuss and see where are all those problems, why there is this pushback from people using it, if it makes their life easier.
I think it's really interesting that you bring up the role of the customer, because it's not something that we talked about much. It's certainly in the morning session. And we've talked a lot about kind of the interface between the researchers or the technology builders and the people who'd be using them within newsrooms, but we haven't thought so much about what happens after that. And that made me wonder to ask the panel actually what you think the role of the customer in this should be, sort of in two ways. One is, you know, should we be involving them in the design, or is that not as important? The other is, should we be making it clear to them what these tools do? For example, if we are using tools that automatically generate news articles to some extent, is that something that needs to be communicated to the people reading them or the people buying them, if you're a news agency, as well as just the journalists who are using them?
If I
can I just jump in there, because that's an interesting question, the last one you posed. I'm active in IPTC as well as a representative of TT, and just recently at the autumn meeting we talked about that, if we need to have markup showing that something has been automatically generated partly or wholly or so, because that could be interesting metadata to pass on to the consumers, how it was actually constructed.
Matt, if I can add here.
Oh, sorry. Can I just pass over to Sala first as a representative of a news agency? I'm very interested to see what she says, and then Marco, I'll move to you.
Yes, thanks, Matthew. Yeah, that is a really big question in STD as well. Like if we automate something, especially if it's like whole content, for example, like a report on ice hockey game. Like how do we tell the audience and also our customers, like the other media companies, that this was not written by a human STD journalist, but by some kind of like a tech solution? And we have come to the conclusion that we have to have like this disclaimer at the end of the every automated report if we publish them, just because of transparency, and also because we want to keep the trust of our audiences and also of our media clients. That is maybe the utmost important part of our business, is that both our clients and their clients, so the big audience, can trust what we produce. And part of that is to be transparent in how we produce our news. So we don't want people to think that our human journalist wrote something that was actually written by a machine, and vice versa. So we have decided to be very clear about that if we publish automated texts, for example.
If I can add just one sentence also, I think it's also important, if we're doing this, there should be some, let's say a tooltip where you're telling how this system works. So even like you're letting know this was done by some machine, and you're trying to actually explain to the end user that it's not something voodoo, it's something that really is something behind it.
Okay.
Marco Milosavljevic.
Yes. Well, what I wanted to say is that, of course, I think that the media and journalism themselves are very much based on the idea of responsibility and transparency. And they require and they demand transparency and, so to speak, public awareness from all sort of other stakeholders. I mean, that's the function of watchdog. So you want responsibility from politicians, from businesses, so you discover corruption and so on, and all that is based on the sort of premises that the public has the right to know. So I think it's even more important for media companies themselves to be very transparent. And we often talk, of course, about that, for example, when it comes to ownership, when it comes to influences, when it comes to dealing with advertising. For example, sponsored content needs to be clearly marked. Hidden advertising is very much sort of prohibited or taboo, and so on. And this is a new part of that whole sort of topic. You know, I think it would be very inappropriate for media to not define the author of the text, which is something that the readers are more or less used to. I mean, the users are used to having a sort of identified author, except when it comes, for example, press agencies, where you have only initials and so on. But I think it would be very weird and unresponsible to sort of hide any fact of that sort. And we also require very much transparency about other stakeholders, such as search engines and social media and so on. We always talk about their algorithms, their responsibility, how they promote something, how they hide something. And even regulation is asking them to be as transparent and more transparent than previously. And therefore, that seems to me really to be, inherited, embedded in a journalism itself. So it shouldn't be a question. It should be very publicly declared.
I guess, yeah, from my point of view as a researcher, it makes me wonder how far we have to go. But I wonder if it's too big a question to deal with now. Talking about, for example, distinguishing automatically generated text in an article from human written text seems like it's quite an extreme example that most of us would probably get on board with, the idea of needing to communicate that. But if we're using automatic tools, for example, as Eva was describing earlier, to do things like generate keywords that can help categorize and search for articles, do we also need to communicate that fact to the people who might then be searching for them? How transparent do you think we have to be?
I think in this case, I think in this case, as I mentioned, like the tagging and everything, that when the tool is something that that doesn't affect the end user or doesn't affect how, like if there's an editor involved, because in this case, let's say the tagging example, in that case, there is still a human being that is taking the option, I'm choosing these keywords. When we go into, for instance, the comments thing, I think in that case, there should be some transparency, but I'm not yet 100% sure, because in Estonia, we have the same issue with hundreds and hundreds of comments about varying from hate speech to something that's literally even worse. And I think in that case, if a user gets banned, I think they should be notified if an automated algorithm shows that they are banned. And if they're banned for any other reason, I think that should also be displayed, but I'm not sure where the like good barrier there is yet. But everything related to content where even if it's like Marco mentioned before, all of this, even if it's just advertising content, I think those should be as clear as possible, because you don't want to reach a point where a person doesn't understand what is actually being written by a human person who has their own ideas, their own backlog of history, their own whatever they might come on the table. So I think that part is important.
Yeah, thank you. Our half-hour slot is passing by very quickly, so I might start to try and wrap things up. So I kind of wanted to ask you a bigger question, I suppose, to finish, which is just, for each of you, what are the kind of the biggest hopes that you have for this direction? Or alternatively, if you don't want to talk about that, is there anything that you're worried about? Is there anything that you think is going to be something we really need to avoid and be aware of as we move in this direction? Sorry, and maybe start with Marco.
Sorry, I missed the question. Can you please repeat?
Just wondering if what you think your biggest hopes are for the advantages of moving in this AI-enabled or augmented direction, or whether there's anything that you actually are worried about and you think that we should be trying to avoid doing as we move in that direction.
Okay. Yes, I have some fears or maybe ideas where I don't want to move or directions I want to avoid. Those are to present the done solution or do actions based on AI models. I believe we're still not at the point where we can replace some human oversight, and all those tools need to take into account that there are more of a helper systems than really systems that replace some human activity. They just augment human activities.
Yeah, thank you. Eva, can I prompt you next?
We had the same question for, let's say, our main page. So a lot of times the question is, why aren't you recommending me the correct articles that I would like to see? So I come to our newspaper site and I'm seeing main topics there. But I think here is also a good question about, I wouldn't say there's a defined line again, but it's something when I think in Estonia, at least, we try to keep, when a person comes to a news site, they will see editorial chosen articles. We could recommend them based on their previous history. We could, based on what articles they clicked on, we have all of these tools for them to see only news that, I don't know, angers them. So we could move into a direction where we are almost like a social media network where the person will go down a rabbit hole. But we have chosen not to do that because I think there are articles, there are news stories that need to be seen by everybody.
Thanks, Eva. And Salah, any final comment to finish this off?
Well, what I wish from the new tech and new solutions, I hope they will free resources, like free us time, add value, help us produce better content, more content, produce content faster. I mean, like, this is what I hope for. And I also hope that it won't take away like any quality from the journalism. So at the same time, the quality has to stay the same.
Oh, thank you very much. There's a question from Olga in the chat, but I'm going to suggest, I think, that we hold that for the breakout room session that I think, Olga, if I'm right.
I will answer that in the chat.
Yeah, okay. I was also going to suggest one of our breakout rooms is going to be about the comment filtering possibilities. And so that question could provide quite a good starting point for the discussion in that room. If, Olga, you want to come and help us talk about it there.
Okay, and the recording is in progress. So it seems that all three breakout rooms have finished their discussions. And that's the time, so to say goodbye for now. I would like to thank all of you for coming here and listening and discussing with us. Of course, I would like to thank all my colleagues for their presentations, for their answers to the questions. I would also like to thank, of course, my colleague Carl Gustav for co-hosting this whole event. And we are looking forward to 4 more months of work and fine-tuning all the tools that we have developed until the end of March. So please do visit our website, send us any sort of feedback, any sort of questions or responses, suggestions, and so on. We are really trying to develop and to complete tools that will be really useful and really helpful to all the news media outlets in European Union and, of course, elsewhere. So thank you again for joining us. I hope you had a lovely morning and great discussions and some good insights. Thank you again and hope to see you at some other opportunity and stay in touch with us.